Hi, I'm Neil Sheridan, the Executive Director of the Michigan Townships Association. This is the first episode of a new series we've got at MTA called MTA Q&A. And in it, we'll have an introduction by Judy Allen, our Director of Government Relations for the association, on the work that she is doing daily with the Governor's Office, the legislature, and the different departments in the state, as well as at the federal level, with me to work through what are our obstacles, where do we need help, and some of the challenges that we're facing. We're already seeing very productive outcomes from these discussions, which Judy is going to share with you, as well as address some of the other major issues that she's working on right now.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, I'm Judy Allen. I'm Director of Government Relations for MTA, and I just wanted to take a few moments and share with you some of the events that have been going on. With the limited legislative session dates and no committees during the stay in place period, I wanted to share with you what your government relations team has been working on your behalf, as well as share upcoming issues that are going to impact your township. Probably first and foremost, we do continue to work with legislators on pending and upcoming legislation. We are working on amendments. We're reviewing proposed legislation that members have reached out and shared with us. This is an excellent opportunity because it gives us the ability to look at it, look at the impact, and get back with them and share whether things are positive or we need to have some changes. So that's always a good thing. And we're working to answer a lot of questions that legislators are receiving from their constituents or their locally elected officials as well. So we also continue to work with departments during this time. They're still working remotely just as we are. And we're working on ongoing pressing issues such as high water issues. We continue to have conversations with them and webinars and virtual town halls, energy issues, and of course, obviously, we continue to work on a regular basis with Treasury on any type of tax issues or upcoming deadlines. But probably the biggest issue that we have worked on and spent the majority of our time on during this period is the COVID-19 issues. These are obviously very serious, and we have been working on your behalf to seek changes to address these pressing timelines that you have, whether it's to allow you to do the work you need to do to meet statutory requirements and to provide the critical services in your communities. We have been working daily with the governor's office and most state departments during this period of time. We have been working to address questions that you have raised, so thank you. A lot of things that you are dealing with on the front lines. We have questions, you have questions. So we've worked with the administration on seeking answers, the pressing deadlines that have to be met, including statutory deadlines and the requirements you have to meet, changes that are necessary to allow you as a board to meet, changes that you need to have utilized to protect your employees during this time, and also to offer the critical services that you have. Some of these, for example, might be the flexibility under the Open Meetings Act or flexibility to fill FOIA requests. We had lots of requests on those. So we worked with the governor's office in trying to have flexibility in the executive orders that were issued. And also, I would say one other issue is a notarization issue, burials at cemeteries. That has been obviously a big issue. And interesting enough, in working with the governor's office on trying to clarify that, that was probably one of the top 5 questions that they said they were continually receive was how to deal with the burials at cemeteries. So it's very unfortunate, but please know that this is across the board. We also work to seek clarification on the executive orders. I will say that the past few, I think we are up to about Executive Order 47 as of last night. I will say that the more recent ones have contained much more specification, and we are not having to seek as much guidance, but continue to look at the questions raised, and each one may interpret it a little differently. So those questions generally go through MIS, our Member Information Services staff, but if they're not able to make that determination, we are working hand in hand as partners to get the answers that you need for you to do your job on behalf of your residents. We've also been engaged in work groups, various work groups by department. For example, the Public Service Commission holds a meeting every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. And I was part of that meeting again today. We talk about critical infrastructure issues that are facing, whether it's a local government, whether it's industry, whomever it might be. And these deal with maybe access, they deal with misdig. As you noticed, our last insights, we included an article about misdig, and just even getting the supplies needed on the protection level for critical services workers. So those are things that we generally will have discussion on. We continue to work on executive orders. One that we thought might have been issued last night, and it wasn't, but we're looking for it in the next couple days, is the one dealing with the extension of Open Meetings Act. Many of you have posted meetings for your board, and you're wondering, Executive Order 15 expires on April 15th. Can we meet, whether it is through a teleconference or a video conference, or how do we proceed? So let me tell you, hopefully before the end of the day, or at least by tomorrow, we will have an extension. I had a conversation again with the governor's office this morning, and with the stay in place, stay safe executive order that was issued last week, I can state that we're very optimistic that based on that conversation, there will be an extension, and it should be coming shortly. Another pressing issue that I think has also been at the forefront for a lot of township officials seeking election, or just any candidates, we have the April 21st filing deadline that is fast approaching. This has been a continued conversation with the administration as well. We've been looking at what options, what can be done, what cannot be done. Again, we are looking to see that guidance. We're expecting something to be issued and getting some direction from the governor on that in the next few days. So stay tuned, and we will keep you informed on that. Now I want to focus on the annual budget. The state is required to have a balanced budget, and the state's fiscal year begins on October 1st. So legislation was passed last year, it was late in the year, that the legislature determined they would move forward having a budget presented to the governor by July 1st. This will be the first year that that would be in place. It will be interesting to see, given the COVID-19 situation, the fact that they have not been able to meet much during the last month due to the stay in place requirement, on subcommittees and committees and the full appropriations committees, and how they move forward on the budget. Are they going to be able to meet that timeline? We're not certain yet, but time will tell as we move forward. So what impact will the COVID-19 crisis have on Michigan's budget? It's not firm yet. There's no consensus estimates. There are a lot of guesstimates right now that are being put together, estimates by economists, estimates by Treasury, estimates by fiscal agency. One estimate is that the state could see a 10.5% decrease in revenue for 2020, and 8% in each of the following 2 years, in 2021 and in 2022. I've seen estimates that indicate that we're facing an $7 billion shortfall over the next 18 months to 2 years. To the most recent I heard this morning was an economist presented and said Michigan's impact could be $8 billion over the next 3 fiscal years. So more needs to be learned, more needs to be determined. Again, Treasury has come out with their early initial estimates, and they've said the state could face a potential $1 billion to $3 billion loss in revenue for the current fiscal year, and another $1 to $4 billion. It's a pretty wide range, but it's all of these are going to have to be fine-tuned with the governor and the legislature looking at this as they move forward on the budget. So what actions have been taken place? I will tell you that the governor, initially she came out and the administration instituted a hiring freeze, so on all vacant positions with state employees. They've taken steps to curtail spending within departments. They've issued a freeze on discretionary spending, And the biggest one they say is all options are on the table at this point. Yesterday, the Senate chair of the Appropriations Committee came out with a release, and he stated that obviously Michigan is facing some very tough decisions on balancing the budget. Again, he stated all options have to be considered, including cuts to existing programs. And his one recommendation was that the state begin laying off non-essential state employees at this time. This is to try and make sure we can balance the budget for the current year and looking at the upcoming fiscal year as well. So, not that this is a lot of good news, but what impact is that going to have on local units, townships, and what are we going to be facing? We're going to be facing a lot of difficult decisions, situations right now, you are, and as well as increased expenses. The sales tax revenues, again, I don't have numbers that we can share at this point, but for all conversations, the numbers are expected to have a significant decline. As you know, the distributions that are made for revenue sharing, there's two types. There's constitutional, and then there's what we call CVT, cities, villages, and townships. And that's more the statutory revenue sharing. The statutory revenue sharing is very limited to the number of municipalities in the state, and it's set by appropriation. Will the legislature come in and take negative action? We don't know. Will there be an appropriation for CVT next year? It's too early to tell. So that remains to be seen. As to constitutional revenue sharing, these distributions are made to all Michigan townships, cities, and villages on a per capita basis on the last business day of the even-numbered months. So basically, when the state's fiscal year starts in October, you're looking at a payment the end of October, the end of December, February, April, June, and August. So you can see with the state's fiscal year, we still have an upcoming payment in April, June, and in August. These payments are based on collections from the sales tax, and a portion, 15% of 4% of the state sales tax revenue is what is collected for revenue sharing. This amount is for the collection in the 2-month period ending prior to the end of the month. So, for example, if the payments are, there's 2-month period prior to the end of August, the end of October, each one of the payment months. So there's a delay in the revenues for the period that's collected relative to the month the payment is received. Now, this might get a little confusing, so please bear with me on this. For example, January and February sales tax revenue collections, the actual sales tax is collected by the state in February and March. So actual collections happen, and then there's a lag of 1 month before the state gets them. Once the state gets them, then there's that 2-month delay before they get appropriated. So the April payment will not be reflective of March and April sales tax collections, but they're really going to be reflective of the real sales tax dollars that were spent in January and February, but the state collected in February and March. I know, I need a little chart to follow through on that one. Constitutional revenue sharing. For the balance of this fiscal year and the upcoming fiscal year, what does it mean? What is that impact going to be? We have seen estimates from individuals on this. Again, I can't give you any amount. I know you would like to be able to adjust your budget accordingly, but they range anywhere from maybe having 25% of your current year reduced. It could be less than that, it could be 10%. We just don't know yet. And estimates for next year, will that mean you will get half of what was projected, 75% of what was projected? We will know more. And when will we know this impact? Initially, as I gave you estimates earlier, those were provided by economists, fiscal analysts, and Treasury, but the real estimates, they'll have a better idea beginning late April. So April 20th is a deadline that Treasury is really looking at to have some more hard and fast numbers. And interesting enough, MTA and the other government local government associations are going to be hosting a webinar with Treasury on April 20th. We've sent details out, and I know we have access information available on our website if you're interested. But there is a portion of that agenda that is slated for revenue sharing in the latest updates. The Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference is the next point, and those numbers usually come in early May, and the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference has to be held by the third week of May. So it can be held the first week, second week, third week, but it has to be held by the third week. Currently, they're looking at somewhere around May 15th. We're not sure yet how or where they're going to hold it, but we expect that date to be announced within this week sometime. At that point, you will have the Treasury, you will have officials from the House Fiscal Agency and the Senate Fiscal Agency, and they will look at the revenue projections, the collections that have come in, the impact, and then they will come up with the estimates projected for the current fiscal year that we're in, as well as the estimates for the next upcoming fiscal year and the year beyond that. Again, these are estimates. As you know, with any change in revenue, it can affect our constitutional revenue sharing. So once the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference has provided those numbers, then the budget, generally you get to a point where the legislature can finalize the budget to know exactly what amount of money they have. So we'll move forward from there, but there's also another portion that I wanted to just highlight and mention. We've all heard about the federal stimulus money and what's being done on the federal level. On the federal level, thus far, they have enacted or passed 3 stimulus measures. The last one, the most recent one, was referred to as the CARES Act funding. And what does this mean and how does it impact you? Well, under the CARES Act, there was approximately $150 billion appropriated for state and local governments. The state is waiting right now for guidance from the federal government on how those funds can be used. What does that mean for Michigan? Out of that $150 billion, Michigan's total is approximately $3.87 billion. Of that $3.87 billion, the 5 largest local units in the state, it's 4 counties and 1 city that have populations over 500,000, will receive their money directly from the federal government. That will take about $910 million of that $3.87 billion. So what happens with the rest of that? Where is that going to go? As I said earlier, the state is waiting for guidance from the federal government on this. U.S. Treasury, the state had expected that they would have the guidance by now, but U.S. Treasury guidance is expected hopefully by this Friday. And some of those revenues might be able to be released to the state as early as April 24th. So while the CARES Act is in place, nothing has really happened on the state level yet because we are waiting for the guidance and also for the money. One point that has been very clear in our discussions with the state budget office and with fiscal staff as to how those funds can be utilized and what the state will do with them. Again, they keep going back, we don't have the money and we don't have the guidance. But it has been very clearly pointed out, both on the state level and on the federal level, that these funds, states will not be able to use these federal funds to use for any previously budgeted item. So if there's something in the budget, they can't supplant it with it, nor can they replace lost revenue, hence revenue sharing dollars to local units. So there's more clarity being sought, and without that federal authority, the biggest question we have is, will the state have the ability to fund lost revenues to local units if it's facing a crisis as well? There's also questions about FEMA dollars and how can those be used. I would urge each and every local unit to make sure they go to the FEMA website through MSP, Michigan State Police, and sign up and start tracking any expenditures. Now, there is a 4th stimulus bill that we are uncertain yet of the funding. And that is a goal. The original goal of that bill was to provide an additional 200 or 250 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, because that program for small businesses will be out of money by Friday of this week. There was a survey that MTA shared with you as a member and asked you to complete in partnership with our national association, NATAT, to determine what you might know would be a loss of revenue. And I know that we heard several individuals called with questions and like, how do we figure that out? We don't know what revenue sharing will be. We don't know the impact of property taxes, etc. My advice was put in your worst case scenario. So again, that information was submitted. We have been working, as I said, through the National Association on the federal level, working last week and this week to try and make sure that if a stimulus measure goes through, I call it the CARES Act 2.0, but if a second stimulus measure goes through for federal funding, that there's definitely line in there for state and local governments. Because nationwide, the economists have stated this is causing a huge shortage in revenue for states and local governments across the country. And there's an urgent need, a substantial need, to help cover those lost revenues. The estimate that was shared this morning in a webinar was that it's about a $500 billion cost to hold local and state governments harmless across the nation. So again, I go back to the point that we have been working with NATAT and other local government associations to try and ensure that there's additional funding in that next stimulus on the federal level. The state's soon going to have to make some hard decisions regarding this. And as I shared, the State Revenue Estimating Conference is coming up in mid-May and will provide estimates. The one question that you might say, well, what can I do? Well, I'm glad you're thinking that, because I would like you to do something if you can. Based on these estimates, economists have indicated that urgent need for federal assistance for state and local governments across the country. We're going to be faced with increased expenses at the same time that the state's encountering shortfalls, and those shortfalls in revenue are going to impact local governments. So on the federal level, if you have a moment, please reach out to your congressional representatives. Share with them the impact and the need for federal assistance for local governments. The CARES Act, the first one, does not allow the state to backfill and fund lost revenue to local units. And that's our revenue sharing. So share with them the importance and the need. On the state level, I would also ask you to talk to your state representatives and your state senator. Share with them that the two main revenue sources that you have for your township are property taxes and revenue sharing. And share with them how you utilize these funds. We need to have assistance provided in some mechanism. I don't want to see local governments face what they faced during 2008 and during the Great Recession, and where we experienced a loss of revenue sharing and property taxes. We need to make sure we can get some assistance at the front end now. We will come out of this, but there's a lot of work and a lot of challenges ahead. Please know that we are here. Government relations team is continuing to work on your behalf to address these pressing needs, clarify where we can for you, get statutory guideline extensions where it's possible. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. These are unprecedented times, and I thank you for your patience as we work through these issues and we partner together moving forward. Thanks.